Thank you very much for that, Sean. So let's move on to the second question. So your short story, Given the Conditions, as you mentioned earlier on, was published in the 2021 issue of Superlative. So could you tell us a little bit more about your own writing process of the individual story? Maybe what you think makes a short story and how this story came out of the writing group that you run, because you mentioned that before as well.
Yeah. Okay. So, well, in general with my process, I'm a morning person. I wake up usually between 4 and 4:30 in the morning, and I don't have to force myself to do that. I'm lucky it just happens. And I find that the best time for me to write.
Right.
So I come into my little writing studio here, and I get on the keyboard and I write. And I'd say that you've probably heard of plotters and pantsers. Yep. I'm definitely a pantser. I'll get down and I'll write, and I'm never really sure where it's going to go. In saying that though, because I've been in a writing group before, and now I run a writing group.
Okay.
I often have little tasks and deadlines to meet with, stories where we might have a theme,
yeah,
or we might have a prompt, and I actually find that can be a useful thing for my writing.
Okay. Yeah.
To have some sort of parameters or some sort of focus.
Yeah.
It may still go anywhere, but it's a starting point to enter into a story.
So that you know how or where to begin, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah. It just gives me a sort of a stimulus to sort of get started on, and I quite like that. And sometimes somebody, because the members of my writing group, I offer them to sort of come up with suggestions about what we might do for activities, and so someone might propose a theme. I think there was one, a sort of a theme or a prompt recently, a justifiable murder or something like that. And it's probably something I wouldn't sort of normally maybe tackle myself, but that's, I think, is some of those sorts of exercises that get you out of your normal zone, or your comfort zone, as people call it. They can be really useful to help you, I guess, learn more about yourself as a writer, and maybe take you into some areas that you normally don't go, and you can often, you might get some, great results from that. So, and then of course, there's the drafting, and then there's the rewriting, and so on, and it being in a writing group and having people critiquing your writing, you then, come back to it after that, and you look at what people are suggesting, and you may make changes or decide not to, or it may trigger something, or in fact, and recently, I had some feedback from some great writers, and it really made me think, well, what is this story actually really about?
Right. Okay.
And sometimes I find that I'll write a story, and I'll think it's about something.
Yeah.
And then I listen to feedback from others, or even if I might just even put the story aside for a while and come back to it, I then might, from time to time think, actually, I think this story is really about this, and not what I thought it was about.
Yes.
To start.
Yeah. So do you think that's because, so you talked about planning versus pantsing, and obviously you're kind of flying by the seat of your pants when you're writing, which obviously is absolutely fine. But do you find that's why maybe that happens? Because you have this initial idea and you chase that, but then actually it evolves into something else?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's right. So in that sort of pants flying, flying by the seat of your pants drafting, lots of stuff's coming out, and look, even saying that, sometimes, when I'm writing a story and a character comes along and it takes a new direction and so on, I sometimes have no idea where that's coming from, and so it'll change in the process of the drafting as well.
Yeah.
But I guess there's the change that can happen there, and there's also the change that can happen through reflecting on it later on. And I think if in terms of my writing process, I think I am probably, as I write more and I'm learning more,
Yeah.
I'm probably, I think, revising more now.
Okay.
And spending more time and putting more attention and effort into looking at really and being quite critical and thinking, well, what's this story really about?
Yeah.
And then if I can then polish and change a few things to shape it better for that purpose or what I think it's actually really about. And sometimes that's about being really honest about stuff as well, and getting to sort of deeper things rather than sort of more entertaining type of things. I think that's I'm sort of, as I evolve as a writer, I'm spending sort of a bit more time and attention and effort into the revision process and the rewriting process.
Okay, perfect. So we mentioned, obviously, given the conditions earlier on, did you kind of heavily rewrite and review that, or was that kind of forms from loads of initial ideas? You talked about being so many characters in it earlier on.
Yeah. So that came about because one of the members in the writing group suggested that we ask other people in the group, what they would like each person to write about.
Okay.
And this particular member, who lives very close to me, has seen me, and in fact, he's actually eaten some of the fish that I caught in the local area because I go fishing.
Right. Okay.
And I fish to get food. And he knows that. And he said, I want you to write a story about fishing. And I said, okay, all right. And so it was for the writing group, and that was my task. And given the conditions, is the story that came out of it. Now, in this particular case, there hasn't been a lot of revision in this story. For some reason, when I started writing this story, I got into a real zone.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
And the narrator is a young girl who's a barmaid. So I don't know how I got into that zone, but I did.
Yeah.
And it just seemed to work. There was something working in that story, and I sent it. It went to the writing group, but I also sent it to a few other people. In fact, a good friend of mine who's an English teacher and has been an English teacher for 40 years and still teaching.
Yeah.
And I sent it to him because I go fishing with him, and he came back and he said that there's something really touching about that story.
Definitely.
And he said, do you mind if I send it to some other people? And he sent it around, and I got a lot of really nice feedback about it.
Oh, brilliant.
And Yeah, and I think I just sort of tapped into a voice or a sentiment there. And, there's some, tragedy in that story, but there's also some optimism and positiveness there as well.
Yeah,
and I don't.
Incredibly strong.
Sorry?
The voice is incredibly strong in it. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Ross. And so, it's not really a fishing story, but it's I guess there's a motive there, and maybe there is some sort of metaphorical stuff there with the fishing stuff. But so that's how that happened, and that does happen from time to time. And I think I've written a lot of short stories over quite a few years now, and it still can be a very mystical sort of thing, that sometimes stuff just sort of happens, and a lot of time it doesn't, and I think
absolutely, yeah. And you were talking earlier about having one idea and it may be evolving into something else, and you're not knowing maybe what it has become, and it's already happened before your eyes, sort of thing.
Exactly, and that's what happened in this story. Yeah, and I love that when that happens. It's absolutely magic, and it's a real joy. Yeah.
Perfect. I'm glad we were able to publish it before somebody else did. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, it was lovely to be published in the UK.
Oh, good. No, that's brilliant, Sean. Thank you.
Yeah. So you also mentioned in that question about like what makes a short story. What is a short story? and look, you know, I've read a lot of stuff about, you know, short stories and what is a short story, and there's all sorts of things that you'll read, like, you know, and the rules, you know, like often the rules could be like you only have one or two, you know, two or three characters and stuff like that, you know, or you know, you have to have a beginning, middle, and end, and then you'll have sort of a debate about, you know, these short stories that don't sort of tend to end, but leave you sort of, you know, perhaps walking out another door into something else and
thinking beyond the story.
So you know, people have different opinions about them, and to be honest, look, to answer that question, you know, what really makes a short story, I don't know, and I just know that some of them work better than others, you know, and of course there are the classics, you know, and I've been reading more and more of some of the classic, well-known short stories which are lauded, and you know, I guess if I had to have a bit of a guess about what makes a good short story is like and this is the same for any writing. It's writing that just grabs you, it engages you, and it's the voice and the feelings and the emotions that it will evoke in the reader, you know, and how you do that, I'm still working it out, and sometimes I do it, sometimes I don't. But I think it's like any sort of format of writing, whether it be a novel or whether it be, you know, an essay, or a bit of creative non-fiction. You know, it has to, in my opinion, you know, some of the good ones, they just get you in, and voice is obviously a really important way.
That's a brilliant, honest answer. Yeah, obviously the voice is incredibly important, but otherwise, who knows? It could work, it could not work, essentially.
Yes, that's right.
It's interesting you were talking about kind of the rules, and how you're absolutely right. Of course, there are short story writing rules, but of course, breaking the rules could be the best thing for the short story.
Yeah.
And how do you know when to? How do you know when not to? And it, like you say, it comes through years of reading and writing, doesn't it?
It does. It does. And I think you mentioned something before when we were talking, you know, about it's good to know the rules. And, you know, and if we liken, say, short story writing or any form of writing to, say, learning a musical instrument, you know, you learn the scales, you learn the rules, you learn about keys, you learn about chords and harmony and so on. And it's really important to learn that stuff, because when you know that stuff, you know where and when you can break those rules, like great musicians do. You know, they know the rules, but they know how much they can bend them and flex them and break them and turn them upside down. And I think that's very much the same with writing. So it's always good to learn, you know, what you were saying about short story cycles. Let's work out what these actually are. And as a writer, you know, like having a clear idea of, you know, what this genre might be, you know, that gives the writer sort of the building for the you know, the rules, the parameters, and so on. Then we can work in that area and know where we can, you know, be creative and change, you know, mix things up a bit.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, that's another fantastic answer. Thank you very much, Sean.
Thank you.